So large-scale combat operations is your worst possible day, your worst possible scenario in the Army. It is when you will be challenged, you and your team will be challenged physically, morally, mentally, spiritually, unlike any other context.
So large-scale combat operations essentially are looking at operations conducted by functional formations larger than combat brigades. So we're looking at the 1st Australian Division being Army's unit of action for, as the name sort of says, large-scale combat operations.
So my focus as the divisional commander is to prepare for large-scale combat, and my focus is how do we op-gen the division.
Large-scale combat operations are a feature of conflicts. They always have been, particularly once we start talk about the World Wars, Korea, Vietnam, those type of things. We're generally talking about brigade or divisional type operations. That's in the land domain.
Fighting anywhere, large-scale combat operations is extraordinarily difficult. It doesn't matter. The geography, the demography, the terrain, whether it's physical, human, informational, whatever context you're in, is extraordinarily difficult. But our region is particularly challenging for a variety of reasons. The physical geography is not only unique, but it's extraordinarily diverse. It's very challenging for our people, for our equipment. Well, fighting anywhere, particularly large-scale operations, but anything along the spectrum of potential military commitments is challenging. It doesn't matter the geography or the demography. And in fact, you know, for most of our corps and for our Army in general, you know, our mottos talk to being able to do what we do regardless of the season, the weather, or the terrain, and the terrain relates to geography. And then we have perhaps the most diverse human terrain across the Indo-Pacific of anywhere else in the world. And that brings enormous challenges. So for an army, a tactical army which we've always been, we need to be proud to operate and fight and win and survive in our region where those aspects of the terrain, the geography, are perhaps the most challenging of anywhere else in the world.
Where our Defence Force is going at the Joint Operations Command level is going to a component model, and therefore they say that the integration happens at the land, air, maritime, space, cyber level in an operational sense. So for example, a Army close combat unit needs to be good at close combat. Whether they're also really good at contributing to sensing and ISR in the maritime domain, we're probably less worried about.
25th of April 1915, major combat operation. Major combat operations are normal. So, and for the Australian Army, they've been normal. So we shouldn't think it's a new thing. It's something that armies do and something the Australian Army's done. The difference is it's in the 21st century now. And that's an Army's job. The professional application of force at a high level, really complicated, needs soldiers to generals to do it well in an ethical and moral way that achieves the mission.
Yeah, so the thing about any organisation, whether you're a part of a brigade, whether you're part of a division, it's actually a conglomeration, or it's the whole, it's the adding together of the whole. So you as a section commander, you as a young lieutenant, you as a company commander, your role within that may remain the same, whether it's a small-scale war or a large-scale war. What you're likely to see is the duration, getting back to some of the things General Noble said. We've done this stuff before. You know, we went to war for 5 years in the First World War. We went to war for 6 years. It's going to be long, so you have to be prepared for that.
There's one thing I'd really like to say. Diggers really matter. Decisions made by soldiers, doesn't matter what the war is. are often fundamentally important, right? And I, as a commanding officer, I can think of a number of occasions where corporals and below made decisions that were pivotal to the mission, right? And in a big war and a small war, that will stay the same.
It's about the orchestration of effects that the division provides in regards to fires, sustainment, engineering, etc., and reconnaissance. That being grouped under the division, and that's what we're talking about, fighting as a large entity, that being a division. We don't fight by ourselves, we don't conduct operations by ourselves, so it's important that we are able to understand and integrate with our partners so that we can conduct these operations as smoothly and as effectively as possible. There's always going to be frictions in regards to TTPs and SOPs of different partner nations, but the more we work together, the people getting together will go some way to reduce those frictions.
If we call ourselves friends and allies and partners in some ways with the Australians, then we've got to be present. One of the things that we all have to understand is that there's this human component to everything that we do in the region. It's a recognition that no one's going to be able to either keep pace with the pacing challenge or defeat the pacing challenge by themselves. It'll take a coalition of the willing who'll come together, who understand the ways one another fights, who understands the way that we conduct operations, not necessarily those things that are technological, but just the simple relational things that lead folks to think that they can count on their partner. I think that's why, on one hand, we understand that for the United States, integrated deterrence is a part of our national security strategy. But corps and those below corps can't really do integrated deterrence. We don't have the means to do that. But what we can do is utilize what we call in the Corps integrated assurance. That's being a partner that can be counted on. That's ensuring that interoperability is as high as it can possibly be amongst our forces. That's understanding the things that are important to a nation and then showing up and helping them meet their own objectives, not just ours. So I think that that's a way to look at this, is that we've got to assure one another. A component of that is will, another component of that is presence, and just showing up to be there for our partners in the region.
Canada, we're not a very large army, right? So we have to rely a lot on our allies and partners, and also a joint force if we want to be able to deliver the effect. One thing we've realized, the Indo-Pacific don't have a choice to have a very strong joint and multinational alliance and partnership, because if not, you're not getting in the region. So without that joint partnership, without that multinational alliance, we're not getting in the region.
I don't think any nation can achieve objectives in a campaign by themselves. So the contributions of the coalitions and the expertise they have about geographical areas, and there are certain nations that have more of an expertise in a particular warfighting function, I think, than ours does, and being able to coalesce and nurture all those expertise into one coalition, for a greater cause is powerful. Not to mention just, well, there's a lot we can learn from the Australian Defence Forces, and our history goes way back. It's a eye-watering history, with the Australian Defence Forces from our time, the Marine Corps' time in World War II. And so we rely on that history and tradition, and we expect that to continue to go forward into the future as we gain interoperability and maintain partnership over the next decade and beyond.
Well, history matters, and our DNA matters as a nation, as an army. We've never done anything by ourselves, ever, for a couple of reasons. One of the primary ones is because we are good people, we're good blokes. We're good girls, we're good guys. And we know that if we have to confront our worst possible scenario, or even our less than worst possible scenario, that we can always do it better. Perhaps we can only do it with the help of others. And that's been the case since Federation, throughout the First World War, throughout every conflict since then. We've always done things with others. This is not a new thing. It's not the latest trend. It's not a fad. It's in our bones. It's in our DNA. It's in our blood. It's in our history, and that's why we're continuing to do it now. We're just the current people who are doing it. And we need to be ready for our worst possible day, the worst possible scenario. And history tells us, and current practice tells us, what we're currently seeing in places around the world, that large-scale combat operations is your worst possible day, is your worst possible scenario.